Greetings, my name is Kerry and this is Kerry Louise Reads. Today I'm bringing you a stats video, and my intention was to get back into doing monthly stats, only because of life / fatigue I haven't actually managed to edit and upload my October stats video yet, which I filmed a few weeks ago. This was going to be my November stats video, but I think what I'm going to do, as that video was quite short, is I'm going to edit it and stick it in at the beginning of this video and then go on to my November stats, just to make my life a bit easier. Yeah, I mean, it's still like the same amount of editing, but it's less uploading to schedule and that sort of thing. Anyway, handing over to Kerry from a few weeks ago, who's going to tell you all about her October reading stats. I am finally bringing you my October reading wrap up. I say finally because chronic illness has been kicking my butt a bit recently, and so I have a big backlog of videos to film. So although I'm filming this kind of mid-November, I don't know how soon you'll get to see it, but we persevere. Anyway, this shouldn't take long because I didn't do a lot of reading in October. I didn't finish a lot of books, and that was for various reasons. I had COVID right at the start of October and basically couldn't do anything except watch quiz shows on TV for a couple of weeks, so that cut into my reading because I just couldn't focus, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I was also partway through a book which I've kind of soft DNF'd. I will finish it at some point, but it was making me a bit slumpy because I didn't want to pick it up, and I also started a lot of things that I didn't really finish. I only finished 5 books in October. I've got my laptop here because I'll be looking down at that to go through my stats for you. Okay, so I finished 5 books. I also DNF'd 1 book, 5 different authors. The longest book that I finished was Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert, which was 400 pages. The shortest book I finished was called Ebbing Tides by Liloutee Pat Cousins, which was 125 pages. All of the books were under 500 pages. I have mentioned in my previous stats video, or in one of my previous, it may not have been that one actually, that my budget has kind of fallen apart this year due to my health stuff. Like, I've just let myself comfort buy books and I've got some ideas about how to rework the budget slightly to hopefully make it a bit more effective. So if I was still doing my budget, I would have earned £6, but I'm not, so that's kind of beside the point. The book that I finished was published first was called Paradise by Abdulrazak Gurnah. That was published in 1994, and then I finished 2 books that were published in 2021, which were Act Your Age, Eve Brown, that's tricky to say, and Velvet Was the Night by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which were both published in 2021. I gave 2 of the books 3 stars and the other 3 I gave 4 stars. So fairly average reading month. Actually, it's been a while since I've given anything higher than 4 stars, not since August. Yeah, I think some of the stuff I've read in November may be getting slightly higher ratings. The book that I finished quickest was Act Your Age, really struggling to say that, Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert, which I read in a day. And the book that took me longest to finish was called The Church Community in Contemporary Culture by Kieran Beville, which took me 263 days. I got a phone call, so hopefully I've got the angle about the same. Apologies if not. I'm just trying to remember where I got up to. Yes, so next is the book that had been on my TBR for the shortest time was Paradise by Abdulrazak Gurnah, which had been on my TBR for 23 days. And the book that had been on my TBR for the longest time was, once again, The Church Community in Contemporary Culture, which had been on my TBR for 1,117 days. Where I got the books from, actually all of these books were borrowed. So 2 were borrowed from friends or family, and the other 3 came from the library. 3 of the books were paperbacks, 1 was an ebook and 1 was a hardback. And then for genres, 1 was Christian non-fiction, 1 was contemporary, 1 was contemporary romance, 1 was a thriller, and 1 was a collection of short stories. All the books were for an adult audience. 2 of the books were from Big 5 publishers, and the other 3 were from indie publishers or self-published. And then the author nationalities, quite a mix this month actually, it was quite nice. So 1 was Irish, 1 was Tanzanian, 1 was British, 1 was Mexican Canadian, and 1 was Trinidadian. So a good mix of author ethnicities there as well. Actually, I think only 1 author was white, and then the rest were from authors of colour. For author genders, 2 were cisgendered men, 1 author was non-binary, and 2 were cisgendered women. For challenges, I didn't do too badly considering I only finished 5 books. So 1 book counted for Read Around the World, which was Paradise. The author is Tanzanian and the book is set in Zanzibar/Tanzania. And then 1 book finished a series, which was Actual Age Eve. I'm really struggling with that name. Actual Age Eve Brown, which is the 3rd book in the Brown Sisters series. As I mentioned, 4 of the authors came from marginalised ethnicities, and then I also read 1 book from an LGBTQIA+ author, 1 book from an author with a disability, 1 book from an author that's openly talked about their experience of mental illness, and 1 book from an author who is neurodiverse. Actually, that was all the same book. Talia Hibbert is a great author for hitting my diversity stats. For character diversity, 4 books featured characters of marginalised ethnicities, 1 book featured LGBTQIA+ characters, 1 book featured a character with a disability, and 1 book featured neurodiverse characters. So that is all the stats. The one other stat that I need to tell you is what's happening with my size of my TBR. I don't have any accurate information for my ebook TBR at the moment because I haven't updated that list. My physical book TBR slightly exploded again. So it's gone up to 844. At the start of the month it was on 806. I blame COVID because when I recovered from COVID I went out and bought a load of books in charity shops. I'm not sure if you will have seen my book haul before or after this, but never mind. Okay, so least favourite and most favourite books. It's pretty difficult when you rated everything 3 or 4 stars, but for least favourite we have to pick the book that I DNF'd, which was Rachel's Pudding Pantry by Carolyn Roberts. This is contemporary romance. I got about 60 pages in and the writing was just a bit bland, and because it's a romance I could figure out what was going to happen, so I just didn't think it was worth persevering for another 300 odd pages. And then my favourite book, I think just for the good feeling vibes, I have to go with Actual Age Eve Brown. Close between that and Velvet Was the Night. I really enjoyed both of those books, but yeah, just the feel good vibes. Of all of the Brown Sisters books, this was the one that I enjoyed the most. I often find the smut level in Talia Hibbert is a bit too much for me. This one didn't seem to bother me quite so much, but it may have been that I read the sexy chapters when I was quite tired, so I probably just skipped over it a little bit, I don't know. Anyway, I found the characters really engaging. The 2 protagonists and their interactions were just really fun and really lovely. It was just a really nice feel-good book and got me out of my slump because I read it super quickly, so that was great. This has been a very short wrap-up because, as I mentioned, I didn't read a lot of books, so there's not been a lot to tell you. And now back to me. So this is now my November reading stats. November was a bit more of a successful reading month than October in a lot of ways, mainly in that I finished a lot more books and a lot longer books. So I finished a total of 13 books in November. Some of those were very quick, short ones that I read for an assignment I was working on for uni. Some were a bit longer as well though, so that was good. The longest book that I finished was The Immortality Thief by Taran Hunt. This I had as an e-arc for review. I think it came out in November. I will have a full review for it at some point on this channel, but I really enjoyed this one. So that one was 608 pages, or at least the ebook edition apparently is. And then the shortest, I finished 3 books that were all equally short, that were the ones I picked up for this assignment. They're essentially little booklet, pamphlet things that we have access to in our college library that make writing essays a bit easier. So I finished 3 books that were 28 pages each. They were called Inspiring Women, Liberating the Gospel for Women, and Women, Justice and the Church. Wonder if you can figure out what my assignment was on. So they were 28 pages each. The total number of pages of the books I finished in November came to 3,526. Which gave me an average book length of 271 pages, which is slightly up from October and September. One of the books was over 500 pages, the rest were under 500 pages. Publication dates, the book that was published the earliest was called The Street by Ann Petry. I had this out from the library. That was published in 1946. There were 2 other books that were published in the 20th century and the rest were published in the 21st century, with 2 books coming out this year, 2022. So one of those was The Immortality Thief. The other one was The Struggle to Stay by Katie Gaddini, which is another one I picked up for uni. You can see I've got a lot of tabs in there. It's beginning to get dark. I wonder if I should have put a light on. Never mind, we'll keep going for now. Ratings. I gave 1 book 2.5 stars, 1 book 3 stars, 9 books 4 stars, and 2 books 5 stars. The book that took me the longest to read was Hebrew Word Study by Chaim Bentorah. This is it's 90 days of daily readings based on a phrase or a word from the Hebrew Bible. It took me 309 days because I didn't read it every day. This was a Christmas present I got last year and I really enjoyed it. Actually, it really helped me deepen my understanding of Hebrew, so that was really nice. So yeah, that one took me 309 days, and then a couple of the books I finished in a day with those short ones that I was reading for that assignment. The book that had been on my TBR the longest was... oh, actually, all of these books are ones that I had picked up in within the last year or so. So the book that had been on my TBR the longest was The Street by Ann Petry, which I'd had out from the library for a long time. That one had been on my TBR for 400 days. I think what had happened with that one is I'd requested it and had it out, and then I'd had to return it because someone else wanted it and I had to request it again. I counted it from the initial date I got out from the library, so that had been on there for 400 days. And then a couple of the books, again, those really short ones I picked up for the assignment, I started reading pretty much as soon as I got them out from the library. So the average length it took me to read the book was 34 days, which is slightly over a month. That's not too bad. The average length of time on my TBR was 110 days, which is really short. It didn't really trouble anything that had been on my TBR for a very long time in November. Where the books came from, so there were 2 rereads, there were 5 library books, there were 2 books from my physical backlist, and 4 books were new books that I'd acquired within the last year. I read 4 hardbacks, 1 ebook, and the rest were paperbacks. For genres, I read 2 inspirational romance, 5 Christian non-fiction, 1 gothic horror, 1 classic, 1 science fiction, 1 regular non-fiction, 1 historical, and 1 magical realism. 1 book was for a young adult audience, the rest were for an adult audience. For publishers, 3 were from Big 5 publishers, the rest were from independent publishers. Authors, 7 of the books were from American authors, 4 were British authors. There was 1 Nigerian author and 1 Indian author. So for author ethnicities, 3 books were from authors from marginalised ethnicities and the rest were from white authors. For author genders, 2 books were from cisgendered male authors and the rest were from cisgendered women. My challenges, I did pretty poorly. So 2 books came from my gift TBR and 1 book was a review book, but that was it. Author diversity, again, pretty poor. 3 books were from authors from marginalised ethnicities, 1 book was from an LGBTQIA+ author, and 1 book was from an author who has talked about their mental illness, actually talked about her mental illness in the book, I believe. And then for character diversity, I did a bit better. So 5 books featured characters from marginalised ethnicities, 2 books featured characters with disabilities, 6 books featured characters or people talking about their mental health, and 2 books featured neurodiverse characters. Least favourite and favourite books. The least favourite is actually really easy this month because I gave 1 book 2.5 stars. That was my reread of Unspoken by Francine. This is a novella that also appeared in a bind-up book called A Lineage of Grace. This is one of the books I'm reading for my research. My PhD is based on these books. So this is a retelling of the story of David and Bathsheba from the Bible, which is the focus of my research. This is the most problematic of the novels that I'm looking at, which is why it has the lowest rating of them all. As you can see, lots and lots of orange tabs for problematic things, very few green tabs. So lots for me to write about this book, which is good considering it is very short. And I've nearly finished all my rereads of the novels that I'm analysing. I've got a couple more to go. But yeah, glad to get the reread of that one out of the way. For favourite book, actually, this was interesting because I'm not sure if you'll see this before you see a recent reads video that I filmed when I filmed my October wrap up. I'm not quite sure what order all my videos are going to come in yet, but I talked about a couple of books that I wasn't sure what rating I was going to give them, and actually one of the books I upgraded the rating when I was thinking about what book I wanted to say was my favourite book of the month, because I mentioned I gave 2 books 5 stars. One was House of Salt and Sorrows, which I read right at the beginning of the month. This is a YA retelling of the fairy tale The 12 Dancing Princesses, which was my favourite fairy tale when I was younger, and I really, really loved this, partly for the atmosphere and partly for the nostalgia. I did think the writing was really good. There was a kind of meh romance but it was alright. So this should have been what I would say was my favourite book. But actually when I was thinking about it, I realised that the book I wanted to say was my favourite was The Immortality Thief by Taran Hunt, which I originally was only going to give 4, maybe 4.5 stars. But like, actually that book has stayed with me so much and I keep thinking about it, and I'm really keen to reread it at some point. I want to get a physical copy of it. I'm hoping that the author gets the opportunity to write more books in the series, because the end point of the story was like, everything was resolved within the story, but there were hints of what could come in future stories. There was just so much to love in this book. It was creepy, it's sci-fi, but it was like mostly set on this abandoned spaceship in the orbit of a star that's about to go supernova. And it's a race against time for the characters who have come to this spaceship to find what they refer to as the Philosopher's Stone. 1,000 years earlier, there were experiments on this ship to try and achieve eternal life. And there are various groups that are now trying to find this data before the star goes supernova and the ship is destroyed. The protagonist, Sean, is hilarious. He's such a fun character. He's a linguist, but kind of self-taught, but really has a passion for languages, which is really cool. And he's the only person on board that can vaguely understand the language of the ship. And one thing I really loved about this book was the accuracy with which translating ancient languages was presented, because usually in films and stuff, when someone's translating an ancient language, they're like word perfect straight away, and that doesn't happen. I mentioned I study Hebrew, and usually it's like, well, this word could mean this, but it might mean this, and we're not really sure, but maybe it means that. And that was exactly how Taran Hunt presented Sean as trying to translate this ancient language on this ship. The other elements I really liked about it was the weird and creepy creatures that the characters encounter on the ship. Basically, there were a lot of failed experiments to achieve immortality. The products of those tests are still on the ship, and they are quite creepy. And then the other really great element was the found family element of these really different characters who are forced to work together and actually find they have a lot more in common than they realised. So there was lots I really, really loved about this book, and really glad to have had a review copy. I will be giving more of a review in future when I have time to write it. But highly recommend that. That was The Immortality Thief by Taran Hunt. Came out this month, last month, recently. If you like sci-fi, if you like speculative fiction, it's one I highly recommend. Really fun. And the other good thing about it, actually, I'll say as well, is that even though it's a long book, it has short chapters, and that actually means it's really quick to read. Like, once I got into it took me a little while to get into it because I was reading other things, but once I really got into it, I flew through it because I was just like, oh, just one more chapter, just one more, because the chapters were so short. So I'm going to say that was my favourite book in November. So that's it. Thank you for bearing with what ended up being another 2-month wrap up. December will have its own singular monthly wrap up, and then I'll also be doing an end of the year wrap up to catch you up on how all my goals for the year have gone. Spoiler alert, not well. So stay tuned for that. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned and what you thought of them, or if you just want to let me know that you've been here, leave me either like a space emoji or a creepy emoji for The Immortality Thief. You can also like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also follow me on social media. All that information is listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!